Hello everybody, it's Murray here and welcome back to my channel M Stuart Paints. On today's acrylic painting tutorial we're going to paint this gorgeous mountain landscape. I'm going to teach you how to use different types of blues to create distance and perspective in your mountains, how to add pastel highlights to push them far off into the distance and bring some forward, how to paint things like realistic trees using different brushes such as a fan brush, how to paint running water so we can have ripple effects in our water, and then how to add fine detail over the top of everything we teach you today so you can create this realistic mountain landscape painting in acrylic paints. So let's get into it. Now you're not going to need many colours for the tutorial today. They are titanium white, cad yellow, cad red, light green, sap green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, a purple, a raw umber and an ivory black. Now I've got an 8x10 canvas that I've created an outline of a mountains far off into the distance. We're going to have pushback mountains that we're going to use, and then we're going to have ones that come a bit nearer to the viewer, another bank, a little one here on the left, and then another one just really close to the viewer so I can teach you all how to do perspective in the painting. We're going to have some rocks and we're going to have a sort of mountain creek running past and some nice pine trees either side just to frame the composition. So if you'd like to copy down the pencil outline, feel free to do so. If you want to pause the video and we'll get started. So we always start at the back of the painting, so we're going to work on the sky first. Really easy. I've got two pre-mixed colours here, which I'm just going to show you how I made them. We're just going to get two blobs of white. The first one, we're just going to put a tiny dot of cobalt blue and a little bit more cerulean blue, just to create a lovely pastel blue. So lots and lots of white, some cerulean blue, and a dot of cobalt blue. You can add a little dot of red, or a little dot of purple just to turn it a little bit more purple, but you just want more cerulean blue than you want cobalt blue, and lots of white to make it lovely and pastel and creamy. And then the second one, all you do is you just get lots of white again, you add some cerulean blue, a little bit more cobalt blue to turn it a bit more purpley, and again you can either add a dot of red or you can add a dot of purple just to turn it a little bit more purpley. So what we should have is a very light blue on the right and a darker, more purpley blue on the left. The light blue we're going to use on the horizon, and the dark blue we're going to use at the top of our painting as the sky gets darker as it moves up. So really easy to mix. I always buy it pre-mixed because I'm lazy, but I've got links in the description if you want to do that, but you can just mix it yourself. Don't be lazy like me. So I'm just going to use a big brush to block it in. There's nothing technical. All I'm doing is at the horizon, I'm using the more pastel shade. Don't worry if you go over some of your mountains. We can paint them back in a minute. We just want to have the lighter blue just sort of peeking up. So we've got this nice pastel horizon. What that does, by having a lighter colour surrounding your mountains, not only do your mountains stand out more, but it just makes it look more realistic. It looks like the sky is fading away. And then having a darker blue at the top of your canvas, again, it just frames your composition, it just frames your painting. By having darkened corners, it gets the viewer to look down the middle. And all we're doing, we're just creating X shapes as we move the colours into one another. So you can either start at the bottom and work your way up, or you can start at the top and work your way down. And we just create X shapes to merge the light blue into the dark blue. And that's all you do. It's really easy. Now sometimes with acrylics, when you first lay them on canvas, this is a pre-gessoed canvas, it's already ready for me to go, but look, because they're watery, sometimes you get these horrible streaks in your work once it's dry. It just looks really unprofessional. Secret is just dry it with a hairdryer and just reapply the paint a second time. I'm just going to fast forward it because it's not very interesting, but by just adding a second layer of paint, what it does is it's like a little cheat. It just takes all those horrible brush marks and streaks, watermarks out of your work, and you can just literally just get a much more smooth, more realistic sky by just taking your time at home and just doing it twice. So if you ever get any streaks or brush marks, just dry it with a hairdryer and just reapply the paint. Okay, so our light colour that we've got for the horizon, which is this really light blue. All we're going to do, we're going to get a dry brush and we're going to just use this, and we're just going to create sort of little circles with our brush, and we're going to just barely push against the canvas, and we're just going to create sort of wispy clouds in the background. We're going to make them sort of like fluffy and unfocused, so it looks like they're really, really far away. So all I'm doing, I've got a really soft bristle brush. I'm just sort of scraping back and forth and creating sort of little circles. And because I've got barely any paint on my brush, you can even wipe your brush before you apply it onto the canvas, onto a piece of cloth or onto some kitchen roll. Just take most of the paint off. And what we should have is sort of like a chalky residue, and it's really perfect for just scraping against your canvas. The background sky is dry, so it's much easier to scrape against this sort of texture of the canvas, and we can get these lovely wispy clouds. And we want them wispy, so they're pushed back, so they look far, far off into the distance. We can even have some sort of coming around the clouds at the bottom here, just so it looks really nice and pretty. And then all we're going to do, now they're pushed back, we're just going to go over them and just get a little bit of white. We're just going to wipe away again most of the paint. So look, I've got hardly any paint on my brush. I've wiped it on the palette just to get rid of it. I'm just wiping it on my t-shirt because I use scruffy clothes when I paint. And look, I'm just going over the top and I'm just highlighting certain areas just with a little bit of white. I don't want to use really lots of white because that will bring it forward. I want them really nice and wispy and soft. So don't push very hard. Look, I'll show you. I'll give you an example. Look, I'm just going back and forth with my brush really, really gently. But if I push really, really hard, look, I'll get loads of paint. Look, and I'll push down. It'll bring it forward. So we want it nice and wispy. So if I just get some paint, look, and I push down, look at that big blob. It's too harsh. So by just smoothing it out and just gently making it all wispy, we can make it look nice and far off into the distance. So take your time, there's no rush. I love painting clouds, they're nice and relaxing. So let's have a few just sort of coming off the bottom, just behind these mountains, just to make it look really nice. And then just coming out here. So we just have a few right here at the bottom, just to tie the areas together. And I think our sky is pretty much done. So we've got the nice light tone at the bottom and we've got the dark tone at the top, and we've got our wispy clouds. So now we're going to paint in these far off distant mountains, and we're going to mix a colour to make it trick your eyes. So we're going to get some cobalt blue. So cobalt blue is really, really good for if you have a blue sky, to make things look far off into the distance. And we're going to add a little bit of cad red to make it more purpley. So cobalt blue and cad red. We're going to add some white to make it more pastel. And we should get like a reddy purple. See that? It's like a bluey reddy purple. We can add some cerulean blue just to make it more blue. And then we're going to add a little bit of raw umber brown. Now raw umber brown is really good for taking the vibrancy out of colours. So by adding some brown, it will make it look more greyish, but we've still got plenty of that cobalt blue in it to give it a blue tone. And we're going to put some more white just to make it less harsh. So a good rule of thumb, when you're painting things in the distance, you want to make them kind of the same colour as the sky, but more pastel and a bit darker. So we're going to try this out. Now I think this is way too dark. It is, yeah. It's going to bring that mountain closer, but because we've mixed the colour, we don't want to waste it because it'd be a waste of paint. So why don't we use it for one of the nearer sort of ledges here, these cliff tops. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to fast forward it a tiny bit while I block it in with this colour. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to use colour to bring things forward and lighter pastel colours to push things back. And because this colour is nice and dark, it's a bit too dark for things that are pushed back into the distance. So let's add some white to it, and a little bit more cobalt blue, a little bit more cerulean blue. Let's get some more cerulean blue. The joys of editing, there we go. So let's make it more bluey, try to be more like a darker tone of the sky. And loads of white to make it nice and pastel. Let's get that big blob of white all mixed in. And I think, so we've got a darker colour that looks nearer and this lighter blue. And we should just be able, this is all dry now, let's just go over the top of it. If your mountain shines through, you can always just go over it twice with some thicker paint and it will cover up. But can you see now that colour is still darker than the sky, so it still stands out. And because the horizon of the sky is nice and light, our mountains stand out against it. So we can just block in this one. And I'm deliberately making it bobbly at the top because we have mountains got quite rough terrain. You don't want it too smooth and square. You want it all sort of bobbly. So let's just block her in. And what that should be doing is the darker tone looks nearer to you, doesn't it? And that lighter tone, if I do this one, should look further back into the distance. Look like it's melting away towards the sky. So again, look, I'm just making it sort of bobbly. I'm just trying to add some texture. I don't want it to be really rounded or the opposite, really square and robotic. So I want to make it look quite natural by adding some little bobbles. So there we go. So now we're happy with the colour. Let's block her in. Let's get a bigger brush. This brush is a bit small. Let's get loads of that paint. Now I think when I swapped to the big brush, I had too much water on it. And you can see, just like the sky, look how a big difference. If you use plenty of water with acrylics, look, all your work looks a bit scruffy. It looks a bit rubbish because you haven't got enough paint and you've got way too much water. So you get loads of brush marks. And because of the texture of the canvas, it sort of looks all streaky. So again, look, if that happens to you, I like to leave all these things in the video to show you it happens to everyone. Just dry it, thicken up the paint, use less water, and just give it a second coat of paint. And that mountain, magically, through the joy of editing, is now all blocked in. And it should look far away. Does that make sense to you guys? So the middle one is not going to be as dark as this one and not going to be as light as that one. So we're going to combine the two colours. It's kind of worked out all right, this, hasn't it? So by combining the two colours, we can kind of make a middle shade. And let's just block that in. And again, that one will look far back into the distance, but a little bit nearer. So let's just make it a tad darker. A tad nearer than the next one. So we just want to have like layers. So to create depths, we're just trying to have variation. If you have everything the same, it will look flat. So look, by just making the bottom just a slightly bit lighter, by using some of the lighter blue at the bottom, a bit like a cheat with the sky, I can make this mountain that's nearer look a bit darker because the bottom of that mountain is just a little bit lighter in tone. And I can make the edges look a bit darker again so it stands out. So let's get some cerulean blue and just mix it into the mix. And some cobalt blue. So I'm just going to speed the footage up because all I'm doing is just going over the mountains with similar colours. Excuse the focus. I think the autofocus on my camera loves my bracelet. And it just keeps falling in love with it and keeps trying to film it. But all I'm doing, I'm just trying to do just what we did with the sky. I'm just trying to take out the brush marks where the watery paint is. And I'm just going over it. I'm just trying to make the edges look a bit more defined. And the same with the darker tone. Where it's dried, you can see a bit of the canvas that's shining through. Just looks a bit rough. So by just going over the top. A lot of this we're going to cover up with detail, but it's best to just be in good practice and just get all these bits done. So let's just block in this bit and we're done. So what we should have is these far two mountains off in the background. We've got the one that's a little bit nearer, and then we've got this one which is even nearer, and then we're going to do this one, and we're going to do the bottom one. So this one here on the left is going to be even nearer. So again, rule of thumb, we want to get darker as we get nearer towards the viewer. So let's add our blue and our red together. So cobalt blue, a little bit of cad red, and let's add a little bit of sap green, which is a very dark green. So sap green is really, really good for forests and things. It's very, very dark. And we're making an even darker shade of blue now. So can you see, again, this should trick your eye. It should look nearer. So let's make this all bubbly. This could be a bank. This could be a rocky bank where we can have some pine trees on it. Kind of making this scene up out of my imagination. It was a lovely viewer that suggested to do this tutorial. They asked for a mountain creek with running water. So we thought, why not? Let's give the people what they want. So if you have any ideas for tutorials, please, I'm just darkening up this area because this area will be nearer towards the viewer as well. Please put any ideas for tutorials, any things you want covered, any sort of techniques, or how to paint a certain thing, like how to paint trees, how to paint rivers, whatever you want. Just put them in the comments below and I'll try to include them in videos and tutorials in the future. I'm just going to add some rocks here in the foreground. Again, don't worry if it's messy, we're going to neaten everything up. We just want to gauge all the colours, so by doing this at the beginning, we can know what everything is and what colours we're going to use going forward. And then in the left hand corner, everything is going to be nearest to us, so we're going to use our darkest darks. So we've saved our harshest colours, so let's get some sap green, cobalt blue and red again to make it even dark. And then we're going to add black. Now black, as you can see, look, just takes all the colour. It's really, really overwhelming. So you only need a little bit of black and some cobalt blue and the sap green and a little bit of red. And you should get a very, very dark shadow tone. And all we're going to do is just make this corner nice and dark. I haven't decided what we're going to have. I think some rocks just here, just to tie it all together. But remember, we always sign our painting in the left-hand corner. So we want it nice and dark. A, to get you to focus towards the middle. Let's just put a rock in here. And B, so our signature signs, when we sign it, shines against the dark background and stands out. And you can see and get credit for your work. So I'm just blocking in this corner. And we should, even though it's very scruffy and rough, we should have a nice perspective in all our mountains. So we've got this lovely sky. We've got these two really far away. We've got this middle one. This is getting closer. This is getting even closer. And this one is super close to the viewer. So we can start putting highlights and all bits and bobs on it. I'm going to teach you how to put definition and all detail on your work. But just before we do that, we're just going to paint in the water just to block everything in. And all I'm going to use the exact same colour that we used for the top of the sky that I've got pre-mixed here, which was cerulean blue, a little bit more cobalt blue than cerulean blue, a dot of red and some white. So cerulean blue, some more cobalt blue, some white to make it pastel, and a dot of red just to make it a little bit more purpley. And all I'm going to do, I'm just using one solid colour, so there's nothing technical. I'm just blocking her in, and we can start painting all the detail. So I'm happy with everything blocked in. So now we're going to start putting all the detail on, and this is when the painting starts to come alive. Because we've worked really hard building this solid foundation. Now when we put all the highlights and the detail on it, it's going to look really realistic very, very quickly. So let's get some yellow. And all I'm using is cad yellow. And this colour, which is light green. If you haven't got light green, you can just make it with yellow and green. And we're going to add a little bit cobalt blue again, just to make it nice and far away and pastel. So yellow, bright green, and a little bit of cobalt blue, and it should turn it sort of a colour of an olive. Think of an olive that you eat. And we're just going to add a little bit of white to the mix. So add a little bit of cerulean blue just to give it a little tint of blue. A bit more cobalt blue. We want it nice and blue because it's going to be far off into the distance. So this is all the sort of grass that is really far on those mountains. And then let's not even clean our brush. Let's get some red. And don't worry if it's nice and earthy because it's dirty. And let's add some yellow to create a sort of brick tone. So think of a house brick. And let's add a little bit of the green to it and some cobalt blue again. So red, yellow, little tiny bit of green and some blue. And we should get a sort of stony colour. So think of like a colour of a pebble or a stone. So we've got these two mixes. We've got one sort of grass and one for sort of cliffs. But they're a bit dark. So a bit what happened to us at the beginning. We want to make a lighter version. So let's just add white to a bit at the bottom. And let's just add white to a bit at the bottom of the other colour. So that's our stone colour. So that could be used for cliffs. And then if we use this for sort of grassy areas of the cliff, we've got two tones now. So we've got a dark colour and a light colour for the green, and a dark colour and a light colour for the cliffs. So what we're going to do, we're going to get some of the cliff top colour, so the lightest of the stone colour, and we're going to start implying that there's cliffs in the background. So all I'm doing, I'm just creating, I'm leaving gaps so that nice pastel blue can shine through, and I'm just adding colour to areas so it looks like the light is shining on areas off in the background, and it looks like terrain. So it doesn't look much now, but once we start laying it down, we can start creating the curves and sort of texture on a mountain. And this colour, even though it looks quite bright because we're zoomed in, what it will do, it will absorb some of that lovely pastel blue behind it, and it will turn it a sort of tinge blue. So let's have a bit coming down here. But remember to leave little gaps so that lovely blue can sort of shine through, and it looks like shadows in between the highlights. So these are all the areas that are getting the sunlight sort of shine down on the canyons. I'm just off camera, just adding a tiny bit more white just to make it a little bit lighter. Excuse me that my palette is so zoomed in. So just add a tiny bit more white. So let's just have some bits coming down here. And can you see the complement between the highlights and that blue? Now it's looking like some areas are getting shade and there is these nice cool blue shadows, and other areas are getting beamed by the sun. So it's so easy, but it's the underpainting, that colour, that is tricking your eyes. So look at this. So all I'm doing is just creating little ridges, look, coming down. Just trying to go diagonally. So just think of hills, just create random shapes. Try not to have them all the same. So it looks really realistic, really quick, doesn't it? But it was all your hard work mixing paint and laying that solid foundation beforehand. So now we're putting all the easy bits on top. We've done all the solid work. So let's get some cobalt blue, and let's add a tiny bit of white to it. And just mix that into our green. I just want it a bit grayer. And let's just make a sort of pastel grey. Now the reason we're using pastel colours in the background is because if you have really bright colours, it will bring it forward, just like really dark shades. So if you imagine these mountains are almost in the clouds, they're really far off into the distance. So they're kind of getting coloured by the sky. They're kind of, and because the sky is blue, they're kind of getting coloured by them, sort of reflecting down on them. So by having sort of a bit of cobalt blue in your mix, no matter what the colour you make, and having lots of white, it kind of sucks all the brightness, all the vibrancy out of it. Excuse the light, it's a very cloudy, rainy day here in London. And every time a cloud goes over, my light sort of changes. So if you see the light sort of change, it's nothing weird with the camera. It's just a big rain cloud overhead. So we're just going to do the same on this cliff top here. So let's just improvise and just have some cliffs or coming down, leaving gaps for that blue to shine to create shadows. So same technique. And when we zoom out, let's get the stony colour. And let's start putting some bits on these ones. So again, it's the same technique. Now we've got the darker blue. All these highlights are doing the work for us. We've already laid the foundation. So I could fast forward this and go really quick, but I'm just going to leave it at normal speed so you can sort of generally get the gist. But all we're doing, we're leaving gaps of this darker blue, just like we did with the lighter blue. And we're going to create terrain and boulders and things here in the foreground. So take your time, just think where you're going to have rocks and things on the water's edge, sort of meeting the creek or the stream. So look, I'm just leaving dark areas to imply boulders and rocks here on this corner. So let's just have one here, just on this edge. And I'm trying to put things in the middle of the painting so the viewer looks towards the middle. We're going to have a bit of shimmer on the water, which we'll paint in later. But we want to have areas in the middle so the viewer looks straight down. So imagine you were standing on the edge of this creek and you're looking towards it. That's what we kind of want to do. So that's why we've got these lovely highlighted mountains in the background in the middle. So let's have some rocks here in the foreground. But can you see now we've laid that foundation with the lovely different shades of blue. Now we're putting just the same colour over the top. It's tricking your eye. So let's do these ones here. So these can have some big boulders, look, joining up to the river. So all I'm doing, just leaving the dark areas to imply harsh shadows and using this colour to imply the highlights on the stone. So I'm just creating some rocks. So let's have a little one here. Come down here. And can you see that shadow looks harsher, so it looks nearer. And the ones in the background are looking further away. And I know we're really zoomed in, so it's going to look a lot scruffier. And we're obviously still blocking her in. But when we zoom out, it should look very real because it's just the colours. And as I say, the better you get at drawing and planning out your painting, the more realistic it will look. But just these teachings alone, you should be able to do quite realistic work with not much detail. Just mixing the correct colours and taking your time and using the correct brushes for each stage. It should be nice and easy for you at home. So let's just create this rocky bank here. And let's just have a few just off here in the distance, just so the viewer's got something to look at. Just a little bit here. And then let's just tie this area as a bit bland here. And you can even look, you can even put some here in the foreground on this dark bank if you want to. I've just got a few rocks. I'm not quite sure what we're going to have here. I might have some long grass and some flowers. So I haven't decided. Now, if your canvas has got bits of white showing through, or some of your highlights are a bit ropey, now is the time to kind of fix them, because we're going to put the trees and the detail over the top. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to spend a minute just literally touching up some of the highlights. Some of the areas of the canvas is just showing a bit white where I've scuffed it, or it's just dried funny. So just by getting some of the blues and some of the highlights, I can just neaten things up. So again, just spending 2 minutes on your work on each stage before you advance to the next stage really does make a difference. So as I say, if you find I'm going too quick, pause the video and go at your own speed. If you find I'm going too slow, fast forward me. Just do what's right for you at home. It doesn't bother me. So let's get some green that we mixed up earlier for our highlights, and let's get a fan brush. Now a fan brush, hence the name, is just the shape of a fan. And all I'm doing, I'll zoom in for you in 2 seconds. All I'm doing the same technique where I'm leaving gaps in the blue to show through, and I'm just using the sharp bristles of this spiky brush to create the illusion of far away pine trees. So all I'm doing, I'm just tipping the brush upright, and I'm just using these spiky bristles, plenty of paint on my brush, and I'm leaving gaps so that blue can shine through, and it should look like pine trees off into the distance. So again, there's hardly any detail, it's the colours. Now as we move towards the right, the sun's going to kind of be shining in the middle, so that's going to be our highlighted areas. We're going to get darker, so let's get a darker green, let's get some sap green, and let's put some brown and some red into it to make it more earthy, and some cobalt blue to make it darker. So we should have a really nice dark earthy green, and we're just going to add a little bit of white to get a lighter tone. So we should have a dark tone and a lighter tone. And then all we're going to do is the lighter tone we're going to use here in the middle, and the darker tone we're going to use to the right. So basically what we're trying to do is make it look like the sun is shining down here in the middle, and as we move towards the right of the painting, it's just getting a darker shade. But it's the same technique. Look, I'm just creating upright sort of splats to imply palm trees. You can even make them jagged on the top, just so it looks like some of the trees' tops are poking through in between the cliffs. So look, if I get the darker colour, look, you can really see it now. But can you see the dark shade brings it forward? It brings it closer. So you don't want to have too much dark. It's okay to put a few in and just have some shadows here at the bottom, but we don't want it too dark because it will bring it forward. So let's just have a bit of shadow at the bottom because obviously it's getting less sunlight. So you can just mix it in. So just take your time, there's no rush. And then as we move towards the right, we're just going to get darker. So we're just using just a darker green. So look, all I've done is use the darker shade, but just add a little bit more cobalt blue to my sap green. And I've just done the exact same thing here on the right. So they're just little triangles off into the distance. Hardly any detail, as I say. It's just more about the colours. And you can have some spiky tops if you want to. Just take your time. Now, because it's brought it a bit forward, you can, as a trick, if you want to do this at home, you can get a little bit of the sky colour and just rub it with a blender brush over the top just to push it back. So what I'm using is the blue from the sky, and I'm just got hardly any of it on my blender brush, and I'm just creating little circles. And all that's doing is it's just basically coating these trees with a lighter blue just to make it look more further back. You don't have to do this. Don't worry if you don't want to do this at home. If you're a bit nervous, you don't have to do it. I'm just doing it just to push it back a little bit. Because as I say, a lot of this we're going to cover up, but it's just good practice for me to play about. Okay, so we've done these faraway trees, so we've added another layer of detail. So now we're going to work on this sort of bank here. So let's get some yellow, let's get some cad yellow and some light green, just to create a sort of lime green. So yellow and light green, and a little bit of white and a little bit of brown. Sorry, it's a bit off camera. So you should have a bright yellowy green here. And let's just have some grass that's in the light. Now I was debating what to do here on the banks. I was going to do sort of long grass, and then I was kind of liking the stone, and I kept going back and forth in my imagination what I actually wanted. So you'll see in the video, it's me sort of playing about with things. And as I say, sometimes with painting, you'll paint something in, and then you'll realise it's too bright, or it's too cartoony or something like that. And I think this yellow, even though we'll leave it in the video and we'll show you, because otherwise it won't make sense on this tutorial, I think a lot of it will cover over later, because I think it's just a little bit too bright and a bit cartoony. But again, we're just doing the same principle. We're leaving gaps in the blue, and this is kind of the areas of grass that are just getting some highlights. So in between rocks, there's wild grass. And in between our trees that we're going to put in a minute. So I think it's just a bit bright, don't you think? So let's get some sap green and add it to the mix to turn it more like a lime green. And a little bit of brown, and a little bit of cobalt blue. And let's try that. But again, once my brush comes towards the middle, I think it's just a bit too bright. I think the problem is sometimes when you're doing these tutorials, because I'm thinking as I'm doing it and trying things out, but I'm filming it, there's no really room for error. You're seeing this as I'm doing it. And sometimes, as I say, the colour mixing just doesn't work. I think it needs more blue, because blue pushes it back. So let's use that. That looks a bit more realistic. I think they're just too vibrant, those colours we mixed before. But as I say, I love leaving all these things in the videos because I'm trying to show you this is totally normal in painting. Trying things out, experiment. Try things, see if it works. If it doesn't work, don't beat yourself up. Now let's get some black and some red. And while we're thinking of that, let's make some trees. So let's get some black and red and sap green. We can add some shadows and things like that. So black, red and some sap green. We should get sort of an off black. It's just not as harsh as pure jet black. There we go. It's very, very dark. And let's put in some harsh shadows here in the foreground. So just really at the bottom, in between some of the rocks. These are closer shadows and they're really harsh. So let's leave that here, just to tie that a bit nearer. And let's do the same on this one, just so it all matches. So if you imagine these areas are basically getting hardly any sunlight, so they've got this really harsh shadow. And let's swap to either, you can either use a flat brush or you could use a really thin fine liner. I'm going to use a very thin fine liner with a really elongated sort of bristles. And it will make yourself, make your life so much easier for painting trees. So let's use that colour to paint some trees in while we're thinking what to do with the grass. And all you want to do is you want to make the tree wider at the bottom than the tip at the top. So if your top isn't really, really thin, you can go back. And if your canvas, look, I'm putting the paint on the canvas and you can see the texture of the canvas is coming through and you get little ridges. Don't be afraid to just go over them. So try to have a steady hand. If you are nervous at home about doing this, you can always dry your painting, mix this colour and then have some baby wipes at hand. So if you make a mistake, you can just wipe away your trees and your lovely painting will still be there underneath. So if you're ever nervous in any stage in the tutorial and you find that painting these trees or anything is a bit of a step up and you might make a mistake, always dry your work, almost like a little insurance policy. And if you do make a mistake, you can just wipe away the darker tone and your lovely mountains and everything will still be there underneath. So as I say, look, if you have some that are cracking just with the texture of the canvas, just go over the top of them. You just want the trunk to be wider than the very top. And don't worry if they're not straight. Sometimes with the trees they can be quite all over the shop and a bit wonky. So you don't have to be super straight or anything. So look, just making it wider at the bottom. And you can see all those ridges with the canvas. So look, just getting thicker paint, just going over the top, get rid of that. Just make a nice wide trunk at the bottom. So that tree's really close. So let's just have some different heights in the background. Again, just to create perspective. Let's have some here. Let's have one sort of there. And I'm trying to make them all different heights, and I'm trying to make them finish here at the bottom at all different sort of places. They're not all lined up and totally in line. Look, so this one slightly different. This one could be up here. This could be just poking out. That could be at the bottom. So I'm trying to have all different heights. Okay, so we've done our tree trunks. So now we're going to swap back with the same colour to a fan brush. Now all you want to do to paint pine trees, this is a really, really easy technique. You just turn your brush sideways and print it, sort of push against the canvas, and you should get sort of a nice sort of rough sort of area. And all you do, you want your tree, think of a triangle, you want it to be thinner at the top and either work your way down like I'm doing and get wider as you go down. So if you imagine a triangle, the base is wider at the bottom and the top is like a pyramid, it's very sharp. So you can either start at the bottom and get smaller and thinner as you go up, if that makes sense, to create sort of a triangle. Or you can come down from the bottom and get wider as you go down. And you should get sort of a Christmas tree, like a pine tree. So look, thin at the top, where we've just got really thin branches. And then we're getting wider as we come down. And we're leaving little gaps so it looks like some of the sky and some of the background is shining through. So thin at the top, wider as we come down. And again, these brushes, this brush cost me literally £1 or $1. They're so easy to use. It makes your life so much easier than trying to do this with a normal brush. The brush does it all for you. So now I've shown you how to do it. I'm just going to block in these ones. So what we're doing, we're putting the shadow colour on first, and then we can put highlights and detail over the top. So all I'm doing, I'm just using the same techniques over and over and over again. If I zoom in, so it's a lot easier for you to see. So thinner at the top, wider at the bottom. Look, to create sort of a triangle effect. Really, really easy. Use the bristles of that brush to do all the work. Just push down and it should just leave these nice impressions. So there we go. So easy, look. You can even do two at the same time. There we go. God, these are a bit wonky, but it doesn't matter. We can fix them in a little while. So let's make this one wider at the bottom, thinner at the top. So no matter what height you do, you just want the same rule. So thinner as we go up. There we go. And look, my ones at the top have got a big splodge, so we can fix that in a minute. So let's just use this brush to give some texture around the grass. So all I'm doing, I'm just using that brush and I'm just pushing it against to give it some texture. Just again here. This can be some shadow as well from these really big trees. And if I put the speed back down to normal, let's get some cobalt blue. And let's just put a little bit cobalt blue on these ones to take a bit of the harshness out. So remember I was saying cobalt blue pushes things back into the distance. So just by adding, look, just cobalt blue and a tiny bit of black, just a tiny dot of black. I'm just going to make a darker blue here. And I'm just going to make this bank look a bit nearer with a harsher blue. But again, I'm just pushing these trees back a little bit because if they're black, they'll bring them forward. So if I put a bit of that blue on that I'm using here on the cliffs, it'll push it back into the distance. It's the same tricks over and over again. So it should be that these trees, now if we zoom out, look nearer. And then look, you can always get some of the sky colour. And if your tree's a bit scruffy like me, you can always get a bit of the sky colour and just neaten it up. So once it's dry, please do this when it's dry, because if the paint is, you've just used a near black colour, if it's wet and you try to paint over it, it might all mix together. So if you just dry it with a hairdryer, just get some of your sky colour and just paint over areas. Look, just neaten areas up. So all I'm doing, I'm just using some of that sky colour just to make my tree look a bit prettier. There's nothing you can't fix. So let's get some light green and some yellow and some red. So light green, yellow and red. And make it an olivey green. And let's test out this grass theory. What I'm trying to do is put highlights on areas. But as I say, I just didn't like it. I kept putting it in. But I think it looks like Shrek or something. It's like when the Predator gets shot. It's like luminous green, isn't it? It just doesn't work. I think because the painting is so earthy and blue, having this bright green, even though in real life you would have lovely, you know, like areas of grass that are in the sun and they would look this like sort of bright green. I think for this painting it just does not work. It just looks a bit bright and horrible. So as I say, I was going back and forth. I was getting annoyed. So let's get some yellow and red and create a sort of bricky colour. And let's get some cobalt blue and create our stony colour and some white. Oh god, all my paints mixing together, but never mind. It'll get there in the end. There we go. So yellow, red, cobalt blue and a bit of white, and we should get a stone colour. So a little bit more yellow just to hotten her up. Just so it's a bit more beigey. And let's just add some highlights just on these rocks. So you can add heat to anything, to add sunlight to make it look like it's in the sun by just adding a bit of warmer colours. So if you want to make your stones look like they're in the shade, add blues. And if you want to make them look more like they're in the sunlight, all I'm doing, look, is I've added yellow, and it makes it look like it's beaming in the sun. So any of your rocks, look, these rocks, I want them to look like they're more in the sun just here. By just warming up the colour, I can just imply that they're just getting a lot of sunlight. So as I say, I want the middle for people to focus on, so making it a little bit warmer, a little bit brighter. But again, I think it just looks cartoony. So I think if you were watching this as a time lapse, you wouldn't see all these mistakes. So let's get some cerulean blue and white and a tiny dot of cobalt blue, the same color as the horizon. And again, let's work on something else while we're thinking about it. So what we're going to do is start painting in the water. I'm confident on the water. And I'm using a flat brush. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start putting shimmer in the water and make it look like it's moving. So this could be a sort of a, what they called, a rushing river, where you have like people that do canoes down it or something. So all I'm doing, I'm using this sort of sky blue colour and a flat brush. And just here where the rocks are, the water would crash against it and leave sort of bubbles and sort of wash. So all we're doing, we're using that sharp edge of the flat brush to create that. So all it is white, a little bit of cerulean blue and a dot of cobalt blue. You just want it a light pastel blue. So let's just have a bit coming here around this rock. We can even have some here on the edges, just where the water is sort of cascading into these edges. And then let's get some brown. And let's create all the shadow tones. So let's get some brown and some cobalt blue and a tiny bit of red. So brown, cobalt blue, tiny bit of red, more blue just to make it darker, and a tiny bit of green, just a tiny bit. And we're going to create this sort of browny blue, like greyish colour. So a bit of yellow. Bit more green, and a bit more brown. What I'm trying to make is all the sort of dirty watercolor that you get in a river. You get this sort of browny green color. It's not crystal bright blue all the time. So let's use our flat brush. Let's test this out. There we go. So this is all the sort of darker ripples that we're going to put in now. and especially around the edges, it's getting all the shade, it's getting all the shadow from the trees and the rocks. So what we're trying to do, again, we're going to leave gaps so the blue can shine through. And we're going to create sort of the illusion of ripples and moving water. So look, this brush, again, because it's got a really flat edge, very cheap brush, is perfect tool for the job. Because look, you can do little sharp lines. And you can even curl it round, look, to create ripples. So by using the right brush, makes my life so much easier. So what I'm doing, look, I'm leaving gaps in the blue. And I'm just implying ripples with this darker, sort of murky colour. So let's have some over here, because obviously this bank is going to be cast in a shadow. If you want to learn how to paint reflections in water, we covered that a while back. There's a good tutorial of a river that it should come on the screen now with how to paint reflections in water. There's quite a few in the landscape painting playlist. So as I say, if any of you want anything covered, just put any ideas in the comments below. So let's just have some ripples over here. And thank you so much for everyone who likes and subscribed and shares the videos on Facebook and other social media platforms. We really appreciate it, so thank you so much. The channel is growing really well, and it's all thanks to you guys. So the more you share and like the videos, the more the algorithm picks it up, and the more YouTube will show it to other artists, and artists can find it, and hopefully the lessons help them. So thank you so much for helping all the other artists out there. So as we get closer to the top, we're making these ripples smaller and more flat, and that should look like they're fading out into the distance. So we don't want them really harsh. Remember, we use lighter colours in the distance, and we use darker, bigger, chunkier colours in the foreground to bring it closer. So we're doing the same rule of thumb with our dark ripples here. So let's make this bank nice and dark. It's going to be a big shadow. Let's just tie areas together. So let's just tie this area together. And over here, let's just make this shadow a bit darker. Let's get a bit more paint. There we go. Let's just darken up the bottom. A lot of this we're going to put highlights over the top, but we just want to lay, just like the trees, we want to lay the shadow colour first. Okay, so that water's starting to look like it's moving. So let's get an even darker colour. Let's add more brown to the mix. And tiny bit of red and some cobalt blue to get a really harsh brown now. So brown, tiny bit of red and a little bit of cobalt blue. And we're just going to turn our brush sideways, and we're just going to put in the really harsh shadows now. So these are the really dark ripples in the water. They're getting all the shade. So again, this bank will sort of be cast in a shadow. And then you get these lovely sort of dark ripples of the reflection. So let's just have that harsh shadow up here. And then while we've got that colour, let's just have some harsh ripples this side. So where these rocks are meeting, we just want to have some ripples going around them, just so it looks like all the water is moving. So let's darken our corners up, again to get you to look down the middle. We want you to look towards the middle of the painting. And then just here in this corner, just to make it all symmetrical, And then let's get some cobalt blue and cerulean blue. So cobalt blue and cerulean blue make royal blue. Let's add a little bit of red, just turn it a bit more purpley. Tiny bit of white. So we should have this nice bright blue. Can add a tiny bit of purple if you want to make it cooler. So cobalt blue, cerulean blue, and either a bit of red or some purple just to make it a little bit more purple. Just add a tiny bit of brown just to suck a bit of the vibrancy out. And we should have a nice bright dark blue. And again, these are bits of the sky colour that are cast in the shadow. So we're just going to have some darker ripples. So again, in these shadow areas, look, there are going to be some ripples. So I'm just using the really sharp edge of this brush just to create some curves. Look, just using the corner of the brush. It's like a really sharp knife. So it's really, really easy, look, for doing ripples, straight lines. It's a great brush. So if you think a fan brush is perfect for texture and trees, a straight brush, like a flat brush that I'm using here, is perfect for things like ripples, tree trunks, buildings, anything where you've got to paint straight lines. So let's put some ripples in here in the dark areas of the water. So we're just tying areas of the painting together using colours. So let's just have some dark ripples here. And just lastly here in the middle. And then we'll start neatening her up with some highlights. So let's just finish the darks first. So the great thing about acrylics, they're really forgiving. So as I say, look, you can paint in areas, and then if you don't like something, you only have to give it 5 minutes to dry, or to dry it with a hairdryer, and you can just go over it. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get a lighter blue, which we used to block her in, which was the sky colour, which was white, cerulean blue, and a bit of cobalt blue. And now I'm just going to put some shimmer back in. So all I'm doing, look, I'm using the colour we started off when we blocked her in. And now we've got these ripples. I'm just using my flat brush, look, to put in some highlights. So these are all the little bits of water that are getting a little bit of sunlight over the top. And it should, because now we've got all these grooves and these shadows, it should look like little waves. It looks like it's moving. How cool is that? So the person who asked for running water and a mountain creek, thank you very much for the idea. It's thanks to you that this tutorial is getting made. So I hope you're enjoying it. So look at that. So just here we can have a little focus point, so we can put some more shimmer as we go down. But we're getting gradually darker, and as I say, we're using our brush to create scoops and to create these dark ripples to create the illusion of moving water, where we've got darker banks and obviously darker at the bottom just to frame her. And she should look like she's moving, and when we put our rocks and things back in, it'll really look real. So this, let me sit down. I always step up away from my painting just to see it from afar, just to see if it looks realistic. Let's get some brown and black and some cobalt blue. So brown, black and cobalt blue. And let's just use a fine liner. Let's just put some harsh shadows now on these banks. And let's kind of rescue them, because I think they look rubbish. They're really jarring me. They're really annoying me. So I'm going to make the shadows and terrain look a bit more detailed with a fine liner. So again, having a really thin brush makes your life easier just to put fine detail on. It's like having a really sharp pencil when you're drawing. So there we go. Let's make those rocks look a bit nicer. And let's just tie this area. It's a bit boring. Tie you all together. I think our trees are just a bit too silhouetted, so we'll put some highlights on them in a minute. Let's just do the terrain first. And if we've done it one side, we've got to do it the other side, otherwise it'll look weird. So all I'm doing, I'm kind of just outlining areas, look. So whatever we've just done, I'm kind of just outlining it to make it look. There's different shapes and sizes of boulders and rocks and grass. So I want a nice dark shadowy edge. And then just up here, this bit will be more in the shade, won't it? So it moves towards the light. And then let's get some sap green. Let's put some highlights on our tree. So sap green and some light green and a little bit of red. Actually a lot of red. Whoops, I put way too much in. But let's go with it. So sap green, red. You can add a little bit of light green or yellow if you want to. We want to create a sort of rusty, sort of browny green. So by adding red to our mix, it should turn it like a rusty green. And what I'm going to do, look, I'm going to start adding some highlights. So again, I'm leaving gaps so the underpainting, the dark colour, shines through, and that will look like the tree trunk and branches that are in the shade. And then now we're putting these highlights on the top. And because this colour is more muted, isn't it? It's not as luminous as the bright green highlights below. I think we could use that for the grass as well. So look, let's go over it on the grass. That looks so much better, doesn't it? See, we got there eventually. You just have to stick with it. Believe in yourself. I think a lot of people could run into troubles because they're so close to achieving things and they self-sabotage because they don't believe in themselves. When if you just stayed with it and used your intuition. And sometimes as well, it's like Bob Ross says about having a happy accident. I listen to a lot of Alan Watts and a lot of philosophy. The minute where you give up something, it's almost like the answer comes to you and you sort of relax and then the magic happens and you sort of figure it out. So sometimes you get in your own way. It's like, what's it called? That Frozen song, Let It Go. You just let it go and just concentrate on something else, the answer will come to you. Have faith in yourself, as they say. So this green has been a lovely happy accident, so let's utilize it and go really gung-ho with it now. And cover up that horrible luminous green. And we can even have some bushes here in the distance. Here we go. Tying these two areas together. And let's get some more of it. So it was sap green and red. And let's colour in some of these trees. I put a bit too much red, I think, but it's alright. This side could be more brown. So as I say, if you go wide at the bottom, just make it taller at the top. So I'm just making the treetops a little bit taller. Still leaving gaps so the black can shine through. So we get this lovely yin and yang effect of highlights and shadows. And I think because these tones look more earthy and natural, it looks more realistic. So as I say, sometimes with painting, you actually go against what's real and you kind of create what works for the painting. So sometimes you might have a reference photo, but the photo in real life there's something you don't like, we can always change it. That's the great thing about being an artist. It's your work. The world is your canvas, as they would say. So again, let's use this funky colour to tie in these areas and bridge the gap between the highlights and the shades. And then let's get our light green. Please don't jinx it. Please don't jinx it. And add some sap green. Just to... And a little bit of cobalt blue. Just a little bit. Let's see if this works. Just to put some highlights. Yay, that looks more better. So this grass is in the shade. So that's why it's got a bit more blue in it. So remember, anything you want to put in the shade, just add some purple or blue, and they're the cool colours. And anything you want in the heat, you can use reds, oranges and yellows to warm them up. I'm just using some of the stone colour just to put in now some highlights on the stones. Now we've got the harsh shadows, and I'm liking our greens. We can put these back. So as I say, a lot of the painting is just going back and forth. If this was a time lapse, as I say, you wouldn't notice all the mistakes that I'm making, but then you wouldn't get a true sort of description of what it's actually like to do these paintings. So let's just get some of this green that we mixed up earlier. Let's just put some very light highlights just here on the side of the bank. Just here on the outer edge. It looks less harsh, doesn't it? And look much more realistic. So this nice edge is right in the sun. So you can even use it, look, to highlight some of your trees. We just don't want any massive jumps from really, really brights to really, really darks. We want everything to look really natural. So let's just put some highlights on this tree. So where, look, this is a bit light now, you can always get some of the darker green, the bluey green, look, and just counterbalance it. So there's, as I say, there's nothing you can't fix. If you go too light, you can always get some cool colours and put the other side. So let's get some cobalt blue and some brown. So cobalt blue and raw umber brown. And you should get a really nice sort of shadow tone. So it's not quite black. Let's add a little bit of black to it. And let's get a bigger brush. And let's block in the bottom bit again. Now, unfortunately, I think my brush, again, I should have dried it. And it's a bit watery, so this is a bit streaky. I'm going to paint over this rock. We'll put it back in a minute. So if that happens to you, as I say, just try to get some of the water out your brush. And then for the grass, again, this area I kind of struggled on because I was in two minds of what to do. I was going to get some sap green and some light green and some red and a little bit of cobalt blue to make that lovely sort of green colour. I was debating where to have short grass, which is this technique where you lay the dark colour and then you can have short grass by just tapping your fan brush to create texture to look like grass. And I was debating where to put things like wildflowers or long grass. And I should have let my black dry, and it's getting a bit murky. Look, it's kind of mixing together. I was thinking we can't just have a grassy bank. It will kind of look just boring. So, again, while I'm thinking of what to do, why don't we do something else? I'm just going to get some black, and I'm just going to put some black just here on the corner. I think we should have some boulders down here, but as I say, we'll play about with it because I'll tell you at home when you need to sort of stop if I change anything. So don't worry at home if you're painting along in real time. So I'm just going to make this a bit darker. We'll leave that for a minute. Let's get some cobalt blue and go back to our flat brush. Some brown and some black. And then let's just put some really harsh ripples just here in the foreground. So just like our really dark bank, these ripples are the harshest of the harsh. They're getting really little sunlight, so they're casting really dark shadows because they're in the shade. And we'll put our rocks back in. That could be something we could do, couldn't it? So let's just put some harsh ripples just here in the shade. So these are all the ripples nearest to the viewer, so they've got the harshest shadows. And then let's get some black and a fine liner. And let's start putting our rocks in, that will cheer me up. So let's have a big boulder here. Oops, way too much paint on my brush. Let's get rid of that. So let's have a little one here. And then now we've got the running water, we can start putting these rocks and highlights in and make it all come together. Paintings always come together right at the end. So that's where I was saying about having faith in yourself. It's always right at the end. They all sort of interlinks. So let's have a rock here on the bank. Another one here, why not? Let's have a few just coming over the shore. And let's have some little ones here, just to tie this area in. Again, with the stones, try to have them different shapes and sizes. So a little bit of variety. So if you have a few big ones, have a few little ones. So let's have a few little ones sort of fading out. And again, if you want to stand away from your painting, just sort of see it from afar. That's what I keep doing. So if there's a little gap, that's what I'm doing. So let's have a little one here just to tie this area in. And maybe, I think what we'll do, we'll get the stone colour, which was yellow and red to create a brick colour, some white, and then you can add some brown and some cobalt blue, and that should make it more earthy. If you use yellow, that will make it more brighter, and again if you use blue, you can make it more in the shade. So I'm just using the brighter version. If your black is still wet, just be careful, because look, it will mix together and you'll get sort of a mush colour. So try not to go on your black, or you can just dry your painting and then just put the highlights in. So I'm just using this nice bright brick sort of stony colour, and I'm just going to highlight some of these pebbles and rocks. So let's just highlight this one. And then while that's drying, I've just got some painting tape and I've just measured a straight horizon. We're going to get the horizon colour, which was white, cerulean blue, just a tiny bit of cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue. And I'm just using my flat brush and I'm just going to create a shimmer. So remember, I was saying the great thing about landscape painting is to try to get someone to feel like they're in amongst the landscape, that they're actually there in the flesh. So by having a focus point in the middle, so by creating this shimmer in the middle and having these mountains in the middle, we can get people to look towards it. And we can also use this colour, look, to create sort of froth where the water, because it's moving, is hitting the stones and creating bubbles and sort of foam. So let's use that colour to go around some of our pebbles and our stones to make it look like it's moving and casting all this sort of bubbles and things throwing up with the current. So I'm just using this colour up here on the stones. So let's have some here. So again, it's just sort of shimmers in the water and bubbles. So let's have some here on these pebbles. It's such an easy technique, as I say. Just the colours. And can you see, because these stones have got this nice black outline, they look nearer to us. They look closer. And if you look far off past the tape and the mountains, they look really, really far away. So again, it's just the colours. It's the colours tricking your eyes over and over again. So the lessons you learn here in the tutorials, you can use this for all your own work. And then apply that for your own work. And the great thing is, now you know how to make these colours and from these painting recipes, you can always apply this to places and pictures from where you live. So if you live near anywhere that's woodlands, or you have any nice mountains or anything when you're on holiday or near your house, you can always take pictures and recreate the scenes with these painting recipes. Don't forget to tag me at mstuartpaintings with your versions of the tutorials. We have hundreds and hundreds of people do the tutorials, and I like to shout them out on my stories. We even have a Hall of Fame section on Instagram where we have lots and lots of people from all around the world who have done the tutorials. So it's a great way for other artists to see your work. I have quite a large account. I think I have about 10,000 followers on Instagram, so other artists can see your paintings and hopefully get you some followers. But it's also really, really good for everyone to meet each other and see what everyone's doing and get to know one another. And some of them are fantastic. So just remove our tape, and any chalk that we use to measure it, our straight horizon. And what we're going to do, we're just going to get some pure white, a clean brush, and we're just going to create even more of a shimmer just here on the waterline, just where the light is coming down. And again, just so you can focus down the middle. So by making it brighter and looking like a shimmer, it just gets you to focus. And then while we've got that white, we can use it to create just some highlights here on our bubbles, just to have some really sharp ripples and just areas that are really, really bright, sparkling in the sun. So let's just have some here, just using that really sharp corner. And now we zoom out, look how real that's starting to look. So look at this. So let's finish this bank. Now I am going to try something. Now you don't have to copy this at home. I was going to paint some long grass using a thin brush. All I've done, as I say, you can neaten up your work. You can neaten up some of your trees and the shimmer if you want to. But I was going to create some long grass with a fine liner and then have loads of wild flowers. But I think it doesn't really work. So I'm going to leave this bit in the video. But if I was you at home, I wouldn't copy this bit. You can copy the techniques just to see how I'm doing it. To make long grass, all you do is you get a fine liner and you get some of the lighter green, and we just create really fine string-like threads to create the green of the grass. So all we're doing is we're just creating these long grass, look, with our bright green. We're leaving gaps so the black shines through, and this is kind of like long, wild, feral grass, untamed grass. That's just here on this bank, and we could even have a rock or something we could put back in here in a minute. And what I was going to do is I was going to have loads of wild flowers, but again I just don't think it worked. I was using the horizon colour, which was white, cerulean blue and tiny dot of cobalt blue, and I think again, look, we've spent all this time making it not look cartoony, and I think all these wildflowers made it look too cartoony. So all I'm doing, look, I'm just using a fine liner. I'm just creating little sort of stars with some white and some cerulean blue and dot of cobalt blue. But I darkened the corner up because obviously we're going to sign it, and I basically hated it. I thought, no, I'm not going to have that. So that's what I'm saying. Please at home, just skip this stage. And then what we're going to do, look, we're going to kind of go with a similar idea, but we're going to make it look a lot nicer. So we're going to get our long grass. I'll put the speed back to normal. We're just going to get a fine liner, and we're just going to paint in some long grass, and we're going to make it sort of a lime green, so some green and yellow and a little bit of cobalt blue and a tiny dot of red, and you'll get this sort of colour. And all we're going to do is just have some highlights just here in the foreground. So this could be the tips of the long grass, just getting some sunlight. Don't worry about the flowers and things yet, we'll fix them in a minute. So all we want to do is just have some wild grass just coming up. So again, just create really thin straight lines, leave gaps so the black can shine in between, just so it looks like texture. Just down here, around this rock. Now, because this is really bright, again, it looks a bit cartoony. So let's get some darker sap green and some cobalt blue to make a cooler version. And underneath it, let's just do some same technique, but some cooler grass that's in the shade. And then let's just add some more cobalt blue and just make it even darker towards the bottom. And then let's just put in some of these flowers back in. So all I'm using, as I say, it's just the horizon colour that we used. It was white, tiny bit of cerulean blue and a tiny bit of cobalt blue, but predominantly white. It's just if you imagine these flowers are all in the shade, so that's why they're more got a blue tint to them. And again, try to make them different shapes and sizes. And they're just on the tops of this grass. And then if we get some yellow and green, just to create an even brighter green, we could just add a tiny bit more highlights just on some of the grass, just here in the sun. There we go. And then let's get some bluey green and just tie that area together, just so it's a little bit darker. And you can even use some black, look, just to put in some lines so you've got a bit of definition between your grass. But you just want it a little shade cooler at the bottom, so that's why I was saying have some bluey green, just so it's not a big jump between the bright yellowy green and the black corner. Now I'm going to put in some rocks. So all I'm going to do is just blacken out some areas just to put in some rocks, because I think that will tie this area together. So let's have a big bank here. And then let's let that dry and let's get some stony colour. So it was yellow and red and then cobalt blue, a tiny bit of brown and some white. So yellow, red, some cobalt blue, tiny bit of brown and some white. And again, let's just add some highlights, leaving gaps so the black can shine through. And let's just make some boulders here in the foreground. So it looks like the grass is sort of coming in between it. I think that looks a lot better. Just looks more cool. Just put some highlights on these ones just so all colours match. Got to leave the left hand corner very dark because I want to sign it there. So even this rock, look, I'm just going to end it there. So it's got a big dark corner for me to sign my lovely signature on it. And then if you want to, you can get some pure titanium white. Oh, before we do that, let's just add a little bit more highlights. Let's get some yellow and green. And as I say, let's just make this grass just a little bit more sparkly in the sun. So because you're going over areas, sometimes the paint dries a bit flat. So by just going over it twice, you can make your colours look so much more vibrant. Because the colour previously is absorbing the paint underneath. And because acrylics are water-based, it's sucking some of the colour up. So if any of your areas dry a bit flat, look, you can just go over the top. There's me again trying to fight with this lime green on these banks. So as I say, it was a challenge, this tutorial, but we did get there in the end. I just couldn't let it go. I wanted that sunlight on these banks, you see. There we go. Just here on this corner of the tree. And then if I zoom a little bit out, let's get some pure titanium white and just put some highlights just here on the flowers. Just so some of them that are in the light look like they're sparkling. And then again, look, some of these highlights we put on with just pure white, it's absorbed the blue underneath. So look, if we went over it twice, look how much brighter this white looks just by going over it with a fine liner. So don't be afraid to take your time. Obviously you don't have to go the same speed as this video, or you can even come back to your painting in a day or two. And all we're going to do, just at the bottom here, we're just going to create some foam just where the water is really, really shallow and it's just sort of coming up into the shore, sort of into this creek. So we're just going to create some sort of froth. Let's just have some bubbles just here on the rock. And just some froth here. Oh, such a pretty scene. So as I was saying, the painting always comes together in the last couple of minutes. Just believing in yourself that you can do it. I'm just making every bit just sparkle with just a second layer of white. Even look here, just where it just sort of meets the water, we can have some water coming up. Just make this area look so much more brighter. It's just these little things that make the painting. And only you will know at home when you're happy with it and you don't want to do any more. So let's create that shimmer. Let's just have a few bubbles here. A few going in here. And I think she's pretty much done. Just a few bubbles and she's finished. So I've signed her in the bottom left hand corner. Now she's dry. So you've got this lovely pushback sky, you've got these lovely pastel pushback mountains to create distance, and you've even learned how to do faraway pine trees. We've got these bigger pine trees that are coming towards you that you've learned how to use a fan brush and how to create texture and highlights on them. We've got the banks with the rocks, we've got the moving water, and we've got the perspective with the darkest darks in the foreground, and you even got the shimmer as a focus point, and obviously the darkened sides to have the corners nice and dark, and this moving river with all our pebbles and everything like that. So my name is Murray. Thank you so much for painting along at home. I know the tutorial was a bit challenging. It's a hard one. So well done everyone for painting along at home and pushing yourself. Thank you very much. Happy painting to everyone. Don't forget to tag me at mstuartpaintings with your versions of the tutorials, and have a lovely week ahead. See you soon. Bye.